Hi guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mr. Andre Houdet, coming from Denmark. Have I said that right? I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Is that
You nailed it. It's
nailed
perfect.
it? Great, thank you. And as always, we are sponsored by Wit Fitness, our favorite brand in the functional fitness apparel space. Please go to wit-fitness.com, check out what they've got to offer, and if you want to buy anything, use code LL15 to get 15% off. But today, we'd like to talk to Andre. He is currently sitting in seventh position in Europe, having just done the CrossFit Games quarterfinals, preparing for the semifinals coming up in a few weeks, and the founder of No Shortcuts team based in Denmark. And if you follow him on Instagram, you'll see he's got an amazing training space, which he's been building over the last few months. And yeah, it looks absolutely epic. But please, Andre, could we start with just a little bit of background for those who don't know who you are? Tell us, from online, I think you started in American football. Can you tell us how you got into that and yeah, how you've ended up competing in CrossFit?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I have a background in American football. Like when I was a kid, I played a bunch of different sports, and I never really excelled in any of them. And in Denmark, we have it so that every like autumn, summer, winter, and spring, you can try out different sports for like a few days for kind of like a little camp. And where I lived, there was like a quite good American football club, and I went there like every time there was the opportunity in spring and summer and winter and all that stuff, and I just absolutely loved it. But at the time, I thought I was gonna be a pro soccer player, so I didn't really want to let that go, and I mean I was only like 11 years old at this point, but I always dreamt about becoming a pro athlete, but every time I kind of went to the American football camps, they're like, "Oh, you have to start." Either they thought I was just dumb enough to hit people really hard or whatever it might have been, but it just kind of came in natural. I always liked contact sports, and
Yeah.
in soccer, you couldn't really,
Mm.
I was always maybe a bit too violent for that sport,
Yeah.
and my dad, he used to play rugby, but rugby, like there was no club near, and it was like a really, really, really small sport compared to American football.
Mm.
So that was kind of the closest thing, and then I started doing both, and I realized, I've with most things in my life, it's like everything or nothing.
Mm.
So once I'd started American football, and there's happened some things in the soccer club, like change of coaches, and then I just stopped playing soccer and all other sports, and I went like all in on American football, and yeah, and it evolved quite well from there. It's still a small sport in Europe in general. In Denmark, compared to the size of the country, it's quite decent. The club I played for is one of the best European teams. But it's still, like if you have to make it, it's not here. You have to
No.
play. You have to go to the States.
Yeah.
How does that
So
work? Sorry, just on that, just like as in like with American football, I'll take it there's a European league then, and do you then
mm,
potentially get promoted to go and play against American teams, or is it just purely secluded to say Europe?
like there's a national league, then there's a European league, and then there's national teams. So it's like three types of
Right.
ways you can compete, and through the national team, there you can get selected for something called Team World, and they essentially set up Team World versus Team US,
All
Oh
right.
and they
Nice.
play like a big match off, and that's like your when I used to play, that used to be like if you're good enough and if you dream about like going to the States, playing for NCAA college, that's your time. Like if you want to
Right.
be
Yeah.
something, you have to be selected for this team, and you have to play really well. And luckily I was selected to go on this training camp for this team, and I trained very hard for it and everything. But 3 days before I had to leave, I got extremely sick,
Oh, mate.
and
Oh
I
no.
really so that was like the worst timing of my life. I saved up money for like 1 year, and all the coaches in the club had helped me exclusively, and And but I mean, I went anyways. It'd been too much money and time spent into it, and but I couldn't get cleared to play any days. I had to go see the doctor every day to see if I get cleared, and none of the days I was. And one of the days I just put my helmet on, but they pulled me off like right away. And so after that, I felt a little bit deflated, to be honest. I also was getting up in the age, like this was my final chance a little bit. Because then you move from like unit 18 up to the senior team. And the senior team, even though they're really good, it was still just, it's not serious enough. Like
Yeah.
there was guys like double my age, and you know they would have a beer on the way to the match, and I was never gonna end up like that. It was either
No.
I'm going pro or
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something else. I also went to the States to live for 1 year, to also try to pursue the dream, but it was a good year, and I gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of strengths and stuff like that. But it's still, you know, when you sign up for an exchange student, you can't really control where you go, which school you go to, and yeah, I've always been a quite small guy, so. And in American football, and one of the reasons why I also didn't want to pursue it is that, like, if you want to be scouted and you want to play, the first thing they look at is how tall, how much do you weigh, and how fast can you run. And those three elements are key, and they're key. They're higher rated than player intelligence, for example. Like you look at,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I played safety on the defense. It's like the quarterback on the offense a little bit. It's a little bit more similar. It requires less size and less speed, and it requires more timing and being able to read a play and understanding the game more. But anyways, it never
Yeah.
really worked out. And yeah,
Sorry, I was just going to say it's funny how the American football selection process is so biased towards the physical characteristics rather than the all-round ability. And I think, well, something needs to change in light of people like Tom Brady, because he's like the classic example where he didn't
yeah,
perform well in the draft tests. He wasn't that big, strong, or fast, but his work ethic and his ability to read the game and make decisions is kind of the best it's ever been. And the
yeah,
normal selection process had him quite late down the selection process. And
exactly.
yeah, it's just quite strange that they don't put much emphasis on that, which actually probably has a bigger outcome on the game versus pure physicality. And that's obviously important, but I don't know, you'd think that they'd.
Honestly, I think it comes down to there's a million kids that are all like maybe similar abilities, so they can just pick and choose. You know, like there's so many, and that's also what I realized. I was good, but I wasn't an absolute freak. Like, and that's what you need to be. Like, you need to be the best I've ever seen. Like, if you don't run a 4.40 and you know, like, you don't weigh 100 kilos already at 17, then you're just slow and you're not heavy, and therefore they just say, you know, we have 100 other guys, and they believe also they can teach them more, perhaps the skill and the
Yeah.
understanding of the game, but you can't really teach somebody to be taller.
No, I guess it's similar. I guess to like over like in China and stuff with the weightlifting team, they're very specific with like they make sure you are the perfect attributes basically of a weightlifter to perform at the best level if you're going to go to compete for your country. So I guess, as you say, with America having such a big pool of athletes essentially, but potential athletes, they really can be picky. And coming from Europe, you as I say, you need to stand out. You need to be something special for them to be like, oh, we need this kid. So
Yeah.
so
And
yeah.
nowadays, it's a bit easier nowadays because they have something called NFL Pathway, where they help European players, like on the path to the States.
Oh really?
But before that, it was, you know, it's just like get lucky and be a freak, and then get into a big school, and like, I mean, not get lucky, but it was just like nowadays it's a lot more clear cut and
Yeah.
how to be guided, and there's this whole like European company that helps athletes like test their 40s, and gives them like a network of scouts and stuff like that.
Amazing.
So yeah.
So would you say that American football was the place where you started putting a lot of focus on your physical training, because you've got those sort of combined tests to work towards, how many reps you can bang out on 100 kilos. And is that sort of what sparked the curiosity in how to condition your body physically?
That's definitely one of the ways. Like, I come from a family where everybody trains quite like regularly, and I have a sister who's in a wheelchair, so we always had to carry her. We never wanted to have any machinery in the house where she would feel handicapped. So everybody in the family always just, was pretty dedicated to training. And then with American football, the way that sport works is that, you play half a season, or you play a full season, which is like, let's say 4 or 5 months. And then the remaining 7, 8 months, like, the goal is just to become strong and fast and conditioned. So I mean, as soon as I get into the gym, and in Denmark that's allowed when you're 15, then it was just back squat and deadlifts and bench press, and yeah, so that was definitely like the entry from there.
Yeah. And then how did that evolve into CrossFit? What was your first experience in a CrossFit gym?
It wasn't like one experience that kind of changed everything. When I lived in the States, I wrestled in the off season, like grappling.
Oh,
And
nice.
the conditioning we did there, I mean, this before kind of like I knew about CrossFit, ever heard about it, but that was literally just CrossFit. We're doing legless rope climbs and pec boards and tire flips and burpees and those kind of things. And I realized that I really loved the training part of the sport. And I mean, I didn't love wrestling too much because I didn't even understand the rules, because I only had 3 months to get into it, and I just
Yeah.
got manhandled in most matches because I didn't know what to do. but yeah, so that was kind of one of the things. And then Frederick Egidius, he used to play American football in the same club as me, and actually same position too. So when I came back from the States and I was like starting with the older guys, then we in the off season went to one of the most original CrossFit gyms in Denmark called Butchers. Not Lap, but it was the Butchers. What was it called? I can't remember. It was another Butchers kind of affiliate that was made for like more strength conditioning and CrossFit. And the workouts we did there, I just absolutely loved it, and I thrived off it, and and maybe perhaps I also just realized that either with my physique or with maybe lack of talent, I've never been exceptionally good at anything, but I've perhaps been always pretty decent at everything. And so when I learned more about the sport of CrossFit, I realized that maybe that could suit my skill set better. And I also was a bit tired of team sports at that age, and because I've just always been so somehow black and white, and it's a strength and it's a weakness, but I just, it's everything or it's nothing. And everything I want to do it to the absolute best. So that was an issue with team sports, because not everybody wanted to do it to their best, and most team sports really rely on each other, and I could not handle that feeling of not everybody wanting it to the same level. Like, that would just frustrate me so much.
Yeah.
So
That's why you want to know when you're out on the competition floor, you've given it everything or you haven't. And because you're, as you say, being a solo athlete, is in like, if you've given it your all. So how did you find, because you went to regionals as well, didn't you? You got the opportunity to go there. So how did you find being in a team at regionals? Did you find that everyone was able to pull their weight? Was you able to still get the same sort of vibe from that?
I was in a team a few times, but never regionals. Regionals, went individual, but in the past, I did a few team competitions throughout the years. But that was most like in the beginning, very like friendly, and also I realized that I also didn't want to do it for fun.
No, yeah.
When I did my first drop in a CrossFit gym was 2014, and the guy who was there, he's like, you have some raw talent, and if you like, if you want it, you can become good, and I can help you a bit with it. And the help he gave me was basically just like, the first month I only want to see you 3 times a week. The second month you can come 4 times a week. The third month you can come 5 times a week, and the fourth month you do whatever you want.
Oh, nice.
So that wasn't like overtraining, and then slowly I got linked up with some connections of other coaches, and and they were kind of saying the same. It's like, you know, if you go all in on this, you can become, you can perhaps become something.
Yeah.
And that was all I needed to know.
So what was your starting point? Like, obviously you
And
said
then
you
I
were,
dropped everything.
so, you said you did lots of squat, bench, and deadlift, and the wrestling conditioning. So how would you describe your starting position when you came into CrossFit? It sounds like a pretty good base.
Mm. I think American football was a pretty good base in terms of like you had developed a lot of power and a lot of speed. I'm not saying I'm very fast, but I'm perhaps quite explosive.
Yeah.
And maybe also some good raw strength, even though I was never very good at that either. But you know, I'd still, when I was 18, I benched 110 and I back squat 150, and even though it didn't progress much from there, I had been exposed to it already from an early age on, and box jumps and some plyometrics and stuff like that. So perhaps I had a pretty okay like training background. I didn't have any engine though. Like my
Mm.
aerobic capacity was horrific, and I realized that was like that was the first thing I needed to work on. But it was hidden a little bit in the beginning, and why I didn't work on it so much in the beginning because I wasn't skilled enough to move fast enough on the pull up bar or with the barbell or so it was that was like more limiting in the beginning, and I was always good at killing myself. Like I puked like always in the metcons, and but yeah, so I think the good background was that I had a lot of like natural explosive power. Like the first time I tried power cleaning, I power cleaned 100 kilos in a class.
Nice.
And so yeah, perhaps from like a skinny, a little bit half tall, you know, odd looking dude, that they were like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible to realize that you're not that fit. And like, well, from a personal point of view, the long aerobic stuff has always been something that I've never enjoyed or looked forward to. So I remember seeing something on your Instagram a while ago. You had a board with kind of like mindset phrases about I will do my running, I will do my
Mm.
rowing, I will. And was it difficult for you to get into that headspace of this is the stuff that I'm no good at, but I have to, yeah, put lots of time and effort into doing the long, boring cardio?
Not really. Like I don't know if this is, yeah, I've just never really put any emotions into whether I like or not, I don't like it. It's just I've always, since day one, I mean, I've always wanted to be one of the best, and so whatever that took is it didn't really matter to me whether it was running or rowing or strength sessions or gymnastics or I never really had any emotions tied to the task at hand.
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter to me what it was.
I definitely feel that is a pro's mindset, isn't it? Which is great to hear because obviously you have such a drive to being a pro. So it just shows that not having an attachment, like Ashley's saying, just I don't really. It shows that he just won't ever be a pro at anything endurance, and clearly he's
Don't kill
happy
my
to.
dreams.
Sorry, mate, but no, it's I think I kind of get similar with me. I'm too emotional with a lot of it, but the difference with me is I want to do things I'm bad at just to get better at them. But I understand that me becoming a pro isn't, it's not on my list. But I love to hear like the mindset of a pro because it's such a, people don't realize that side of it. They just see the training, especially on Insta and stuff like that. They see maybe the nutrition, but they hear about the mindset, but then they really get an insight into it. So to hear little things like that, just a phrase in your head, like, I just don't have an emotional attachment to, I just do what I need to do. I think it's such a nice thing for our listeners to hear, like what it takes to be that. And if you are having those emotional thoughts towards something, maybe either change your narrative or maybe it's just not for you.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, I agree.
Cultivating that CrossFit machine headspace, I think, is really important if you want to get to the top. It's just, yeah, I am a machine. I do what I need to do. And I think it was a guy from one of the RP strength guys, maybe Mike Israel or someone. He was saying that if you imagine your competitor and even if it's in MMA or a fighting sport, if they're a hothead, they're really loud, aggressive, and volatile, would you be more scared of that guy, or would you be more scared of the guy who's like a cyborg and he's just does everything perfect, really consistently all the time? He does exactly what's required. Doesn't like he's not over emotional and uncontrolled, and one day he'll overtrain and then wreck his body. Whereas the guy who knows precisely what's required and just does exactly that day in, day out, every single time, and then he turns up in the cage or in the ring and is like, yeah, I'm ready. Who's more intimidating to face? Like the volatile sort of loudmouth, he's going to be a bit wild and a bit all over the place, but actually that cyborg is way more intimidating because you're like, shit, this guy has just done things perfectly. And I think having that mindset is
within CrossFit, I think that the person Goodmanson really comes out to me. You just someone that is just, I'd say, like a cyborg way, just so focused, and just how he does things is why he's just always at that top level within those top five consistently, because he just and when I got to obviously lift with him when he come to WIT for that virus lift off, and even just like seeing how he was warming up and like everything, like even though everyone else was there kind of a bit social and stuff, he was to some degree, but he was so focused. It was inspiring to see. So
he's definitely an idol of mine. I also was very fortunate to go to Iceland 4 times in 2015 to train with him, and like you said, everything he does is just it seems like it's to perfection. Like mid-workout, his reps will look identical to what they looked in the warm-up and to a max lift, or it doesn't matter if it's touch and go or if it's 1RM, like his snatch will look the same, his muscle-ups look the same, and he's definitely like, there's not many guys I look up to or that I find like, wow, this guy is inspiring, or he has all these qualities. But I definitely think BKG has, for me, most of them that I look up to compared to any other.
Who else is on that list, even outside of CrossFit?
I think I look up to a lot of people outside of CrossFit. I still haven't found that one person where you have every single thing that I look up to, and like you're just my idol. I think taking pieces from different sports, from different athletes, and kind of putting it together as the athlete I want to be. I once tried to like backwrite my story somehow. I wanted to figure out what it took to become the best, and what it still takes, I still don't know, but I wanted to give my best guess on it, and what that person looks like. What does the person who wins the CrossFit game looks like, in my opinion? And then I wanted to try to write down all the characteristics and the qualities of that person, and what does that person do on a day-to-day basis, and then try to, then go back and say, okay, like this is Andre 1.0, and you want to be Andre 2.0. What does that take? Because that 2.0 is the guy who's going to win everything. And it's not easy. And it's also not easy when you have, like, I think Matt Fraser, of course, has like a tremendous amount of qualities. For me, if he had to be the perfect match, he would have to have the gentleman and be a gentleman like Roger Federer, and have kind of those qualities also, and that's what I just miss a little bit with many of the CrossFit athletes. I miss sometimes, and what I want to do myself is just that professionalism, and that it's just they're not, Roger Federer is not sponsored by some crap brands that sells bad products, and he plays more tennis than he posts on Instagram. And even though I also post on Instagram a lot, I try to keep it so that it's for business, and it is to help propel my athletic career, but for real athletes, I hope that, for me, most athletes outside of the sport in the top level, that they live off being an athlete and off performing, and not off being an influencers. And I love that about it. So yeah.
Do you think that that also carries over to other areas of your life? Just because when you were saying about like looking to multiple people for like inspiration or like role models, it's like for the listeners, like you've got a massive collection of books behind you of all different sorts of styles of books. Do you like to take a lot of like learning from different books to kind of into the athletic thing? And have you found like a particular book that's really helped your athletic endeavors?
Yeah, there was a phase where I tried to read like everything, get my hands on, listen to every podcast to get my hands on, and I was also hosting a podcast show for a few years, and try to just get info from everyone and kind of pick out what I liked, and but also not just read it and then pass it on, like read it and then go through it again, like what is that I need to take with me here, and what's applicable, and what's just a nice thought but not something you can really put into life. And after like a couple of years of doing that, I actually just kind of stopped reading because I felt like the books were just repeating the same things. And I think you can get caught in that trap a little bit of, you listen to a new podcast every day and trying to learn something and a new habit and a new life hack. And, sometimes you just have to nail down one life hack and do that for a few years. And once you've nailed that down, you can add a new one. And once you nail that down for consistently for a long time, then you can try to bring another one. I think for my athletic, for athletic reasons, the best books I've read is all biographies. So I right now I only read biographies of pro athletes, and those seems to teach me the most, because you can get more on the inside, and you can you get more of the inside of the athlete. It's not just a motivational quote from someone. It's you get to learn about their habits and what are the small day-to-day things they're doing, or how they were brought up, or those kind of things. So I would definitely recommend biographies. Again, there still hasn't been one that's been like, wow, this one is just absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
I think I'm Here to Win by Maka, which is a triathlete. He's an Ironman.
Okay.
Chris McCormack. I don't know if I pronounced that. McCormack.
Okay.
I think triathletes are the ones I can, compared to like CrossFit, it's the sport that I can relate to the most, and I think we can pull most diagonals to somehow, because it's also a suffer sport, and it's perhaps more about work capacity and less about skill to some extent, even though CrossFit it is a very skilled sport, and there's a lot of skills, but I think at the top level it doesn't come down to who can do the nicest muscle ups or the nicest handstand walks, just who has just a brutal capacity, and I think it's the same in triathlon. It's about swimming technique and sitting good on the bike and running well, but in the end of the day, it comes down to who can suffer the most. And and I think I've learned that from Phil Mansfield, who was my former coach from Red Pill, and he taught me so many things about that, and also him being very involved with triathlon and stuff like that. He helped me cultivate that mindset. That was just super important for my future.
It seems like that's a common theme throughout your whole life, is you just had that strong mindset of, pushing yourself till you puked, even from when you started CrossFit. Where do you think that came from? And tell us some more about how you cultivated it to make it even stronger, as now you've recognized how important it is for CrossFit.
I think to some extent you're driven by things that happen in your life, and I think unfortunately sometimes success can come from misery, and for me, maybe some people would say I've had perhaps a tough childhood. I lost my brother in an accident. My sister's in a wheelchair. She's been close to dying many times, and so I think those things just definitely helps drive me, because I know that tomorrow is not promised. The future is is essentially just an illusion. It's not something that really exists. The only thing that exists is the present. And like, I just live pedal to the metal every day. And that's just the way I choose to live, and I choose that based on what's happening in my life. And I also just think I come from a family where we just do that. You know, we take nothing for given and nothing for granted. And like, whatever my dad, he's done his life, he's always been striving to be the absolute best. Like, and he's a chef, and he's had Michelin restaurant. He's the mentor of the guy who owns Noma, who's the number one ranked restaurant in the world. And he's always been really not tough on us, but it's always been very tough to get recognized. So you always strive for your best. And you know, you work harder when it's harder to get a high five, when your parents don't, like, they never asked me to do my homework. They never asked me if I did my training. It was just, if you didn't do, what are you doing? Like if you want to be something in life, then we don't even need to ask you if you did your homework. Of course you did it, because if not, you're never going to make it anywhere. And it doesn't matter if it's in sports or in school. It was always the same. Like,
Yeah.
you know, my dad used to tell me, either you can sit in the back row with the guys who will never become anything, or you can sit in the front row and be lonely. But, you know, it's the guy who sits in the front row who's going to make it. So, yeah, that's what you have to do. And so everything since I was a kid was always like that. And then with the things with my sister and my brother, you know, they just, yeah, they just shaped me, and they drove me even harder. And now it's just such a natural instinct or a natural ability. And yeah, it's just who I am, I guess.
Yeah, I think accepting that loneliness of, like, it's lonely at the top is the classic saying that people always say, but it's so true that if you do want to stand out, it is the lonely path, and there's not many people to share it with. One thing that I just thought of there is, if you are so used to pushing yourself very, very hard, have you found yourself in the position of overtraining and doing too much? Just because that's a bit of a topic that people like to discuss, the concept of overtraining and, you know, pushing your body to the limit all the time. Have you found that you've had to learn to rein it back in and be smarter rather than training harder always?
I think to some extent, yes. Like, I've definitely made mistakes myself, and also, I mean, most of my CrossFit career and my athletic journey has been coached by someone. And I think that's maybe also why I coach myself now, and I've been doing that for 1.5 years. That I always found it difficult to. I always do what I've been told to do. And I think that's probably something most people can relate to. Is like, if the session says 10 by 10, but you feel something at the 7th set that is not feeling good. I've always battled a lot with stopping there. I've always been good enough to make that call, but sometimes you're not smart enough to make that call. And I find that easier to make day-to-day decisions when I'm in charge myself of the programming. It also comes with a great responsibility and a great amount of discipline, but I always found it so difficult, because especially in CrossFit, it's like, the reality is, and perhaps it's the reality in most elite sports, it's, you're going to feel something almost every day. Perhaps not every day, but often, let's put it that way. Especially when you're in a competition, like close to peaking, or there's going to be things that are not feeling good, and you're going to have to know whether or not how to adapt that, like how to either see if you can fix it yourself in the session and then move on, or if you can modify the exercise, or if you stop. Like, those 3 decisions, one of those needs to be made. And if you don't make one of those, then you might be risking overtraining. So I would definitely say the last 1.5 year, there's been no overtraining. It's always riding the fine line. But I think I've been, yeah, it's hard to say, but, you know, maybe I've been pretty good at not riding over. I think I don't want to risk getting injured but you also have to be careful and not risk not getting more fit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
find that's just such a tricky balance, and but only you can know to some extent.
Do you have
But it also,
any,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, do you have any
no,
data or anything that you use to like ride that fine line? Because you feel in your body like you're peaking for a competition, things are starting to ache, you're getting niggles, but you've obviously got your performance metrics, like the numbers you lift and the times on all your cardio. How do you sort of take in all that information to make the right decisions of whether you need to train harder or maybe you're doing too much?
sometimes like in the past I've been using HRV, and I've been trying to like be a bit more geeky about the data and that kind of stuff. But the past like 4 years, I dropped it completely. Those kind of things. Like I use heart rate for like heart rate monitors for my engine sessions, and use that to navigate me for the more monostructural stuff, where I have, like where I've done like VO2 testing, and where I know where to sit. I stopped using it completely in mixed modal stuff, simply because I don't think the heart rate zones has a carryover to that kind of stuff, due to the skill. But no, not really. It's a little bit, I feel like always my first rule is ignore what you feel in the morning. Whatever you
Yeah.
feel in the morning doesn't determine the day. Because I always feel sore getting out of the bed in the morning, and it never feels great. It's always like you're just always a little bit beat up to some extent. So I never make any calls until I've done a warm up.
Yeah.
So I get into my first session, doesn't matter how I feel, and after my warm up, or then I'll determine whether I need to modify something or not. But more often than not, I just turn down intensity slightly, and then I continue, and or modify. Like I try to. I think this is something I learned from Mansfield. To maybe look less. Don't quote me on this, because this might sound like not super intelligent, but I think CrossFit, we can look very specific as exercises, and not so specific, and too specific on exercises. But sometimes it's good to dial things back and look more at energy systems and movement patterns. It's like, if it hurts hanging in the bar, okay, maybe don't do 200 chest to bars today. But if ring rows don't hurt, then we can do ring rows. It's same pattern. Like it's not the same skill, but similar muscle groups. Or if the plan was to go for a long run, and there's something in the foot, or then we try to match that heart rate zone or similar for a long bike ride. And I've just with time become less and less concerned with the exercise selection, perhaps, and more with patterns and energy systems, and that kind of stuff. And it, for me, that has been a good approach. So I think if you use that approach, then it's easy to day feel and modify training. So you don't freak out if you can't do muscle ups. If you don't do muscle ups for a month, you're fine. If you can do, ring dips or pull ups, or even though the skill is not the same, but if you can still put it in a similar scenario and a similar fatigue and similar muscle groups, my personal opinion is that it still works as almost as good.
Yeah, that's something I say quite a lot. Is just like, what's the stimulus? If you get clear on what the stimulus is, you can achieve that in a few different ways, and it still inspires the same adaptation in the body. So even if it's not
Yeah.
exactly the same skill, the body can still adapt in that direction
Yeah.
using something else. That's really cool. Are there any other sort of moments of realization with your training that you've thought, I can do this a new way, or I'm going to change the way that I
Um,
do this?
yeah, I feel like every year there's like, it's like a new experience where I go, wow, that I never experienced. But this year, the biggest one of them all was that, like, I have always had a lot of troubles with my strength, even though I come from my background in strength. But, but it's just never, like, I've done so many different things, and so like few different coaches and different approaches, and my strength just never really went up. And like I follow the program A to Z. I sleep 10 hours, like 4,000 plus calories. My supplements are dialed in to the absolute best of my abilities with the science that I know and from the guidance that I have. Uh, so, but I still kind of thought, maybe I'm the issue. Like maybe I'm not working hard enough, or there must be something that's going wrong. But I hired a strength coach. So I now that I do my own programming, I try to bring in specialists that guide me and that help program for me in certain things, and I kind of put it together with their stuff and in one structure. And there's this one strength coach that's been helping me, and one thing I learned from him is that you don't need to squat 3 times a week heavy to get strong. And I think that's something most people believe in. Most companies, they sell their 8 week or 12 week squat program, and the fact is just, in my experience, most people don't make it through because their knees start hurting after week 4, and every week the progressions are 5% heavier or 5 kilos heavier, and
Mhm.
it just doesn't work like that for most people. And this guy, I basically squatted once a week max, and then the rest of the time I was doing like split squats of different variations and different, like, just actually isolating the muscles instead of always doing compound exercises. And my strength numbers, I've never I like almost want to cry of happiness.
So good.
Like, it was just insane. All of a sudden, I hadn't back squatted over 150 for like 12 weeks, and I had not done any like super heavy single leg exercises either. And the next day, I back squat 200,
Nice.
and the heaviest I've ever gone, like doing the craziest squat cycles and stuff like that, and only focusing on strength, was like 190, and that was just barely. But the same
Yeah.
happened to all the numbers. My deadlift, my press, all my weightlifting numbers just went boom for the first time in like 6 years.
Wow.
And I was just doing more just bodybuilding and strength. My body was feeling much more healthy. It allowed
Yeah.
me to increase volume across other domains because I didn't need to do 10 by 10 back squats. Like, it was like 8 by 4. And for him, that was like really high volume in his world. And I was like, that's like nothing. So I think, like, yeah, you always learn, but that was definitely one of the things, and I think that's a big takeaway for most people. You don't need to back squat 3 times a week, and going, like, the nervous system doesn't need to be stressed with 95 to 100% like loading to lift it, even though that's maybe a little bit what we learned from powerlifting. I definitely think, at the top level and to some extent, there needs to be that stimulus, and there's, I'm not saying it's bad at all, and I think you should do it to some extent, but you just don't need to do it that often to get those gains. And it was the same like for the quarterfinals. My like best front squat ever is 170, and I have not been close. I have not been over 140 in training for 6-7 months. But I did 4 reps of 177. Like,
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. Like, I
Yeah.
Amazing.
it's just yeah. So I think that's just been super mind blowing to me, that that actually I didn't need to build a heavy snatch every week. I didn't build a heavy snatch for 6 months, and then I snatched 130. Like, but you're just doing loads of reps at 100 and focus on quality movements and paying attention to details of exercises. And that's also what I hired that coach to. He was like, the way you perform these like bodybuilding accessory or strength exercise is just not optimal. Like, come here to me and every week and we'll have a look at them. And the way he optimized my movement, like, it's like the Bulgarian split squat, that used to be like my main like accessory lower legs unilateral exercise, and he made it like a rear foot elevated where the toe is on like an elevation, and the leg is the ankle joint is flexed, and he's explaining me how that stabilizes my knee, and how, like, using both legs in that movement, and all of a sudden I'm doing split squats with like 90 kilos with pause in the bottom, and but it's the same exercise, but just by
Yeah.
changing small things, and same with a dumbbell shoulder press and those kind of things, like small adjustments can actually seem to me actually to be more important than doing 8x4, 10x10, or like the
Yeah.
reps and the load, and was less relevant when the movement was so poor.
The tweaks. All about the
Yeah.
tweaks.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Something I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned you're sleeping 10 hours a day. You're eating over 4,000 calories. I think everyone's always curious to understand sort of a day in the life of an elite athlete. What are some of the other daily practices you have that might surprise people, and some sacrifices, I think? Walk us through the trade-offs that you make to optimize your performance.
I think for like elite athletes, and I would love to be in that category now, or I mean, like to see myself at least in it. I mean, Mansfield used to say something like, if you want to be a pro athlete, you have to be a pro athlete for a long time first.
Yeah.
Like, you have to live like one for many years in order to become one. And I'm still not a pro athlete because I still don't live off CrossFit and solely like performance and excellence. But that's definitely the goal and the dream one day. But I think there you don't feel there's a big trade-off really. Like if you love, like if you want to be the best, you just love it. Like you love to you love to train, and that's more important than going out for dinner with friends and those kind of things. And Lindsay, she's and she also likes to live a little bit like we live, and it doesn't feel like much sacrifice to her either. So basically we moved out of the city where we used to live and moved to a countryside home, 1 hour from the city and 1 hour from my family. And that's maybe the only sacrifice. I love to see my family, but I also know that when I'm close by, they 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 don't use me a lot, but to some extent, you can, like, to sum it up, like, I met a triathlon coach out here who has 2 kids that want to become Olympians, and he also moved from the city out here, and he said to me, I completely understand why you moved out here, because you can't become an Olympian if you sit every weekend at birthday parties when you want to be on your bike. Like, and I think that's a little bit of what it comes down to. I'm still close enough to go see them every week, but it's on my terms when I choose, so it doesn't interfere with training or those things. So I think that's the sacrifice. It's like you have to have, so I love to have a lot of things going on with business or work or with family and training and stuff, but I really have had to tell myself to dial it down and dumb it down a little bit to some extent. Like, you need to love watching Netflix also. Like, and I used to say, if you had time to watch Netflix, you'll never become anything. But I've also learned that I need that downtime is
Yeah.
unfortunately essential. I can't be running around doing 10,000 things between sessions if I want to be that good. Like, I can do that when I'm done one day. Then I can do a million things, and I think that for me is perhaps one of the hardest things. I love coaching and I love programming and helping people, and I want to say yes to every opportunity, but I've realized I've had to cut my business in half, and I've had to train, eat, sleep, and that has to be my main thing. And then I coach on the side and I program on the side, but the number one thing that I do, and nothing else can take more hours out of the day than this one task. And that has to be training. So I think that's the only thing for me personally. Like, it's nothing about eating healthy or taking the supplements or training 2-3 times. That doesn't really feel like a sacrifice. That's something I want. Like, I want to be really good, so that's what you need to do. Yeah.
It's great to hear. I think it's it's the only attitude you can really have. Like, if it feels like you are not doing what you want in some way, like I think even for like a common like stereotypical gym goer who wants to lose a bit of weight, that's what they want. But if they see it as sacrifice and they see it as something that is not what they want, and they're like, oh, I have to go to the gym, or I can't eat this, or you're focusing on all the negatives, when actually overall you are doing what you want. It's just long term what you want rather than short term what you want. In this moment now, you might want a chocolate bar rather than a salad, but in 6 weeks you're going to be happy that you had the salad, and it is in your own interest, but you depends how you frame it. So the way you talk about that as, this is actually what I want. I want to be the best, so I want to train 3 times a day. I want to get 10 hours of sleep. Versus somebody else might think, oh, I've got to go to bed early because I've got to do this. Like, no, you get to be a better athlete as a result of those actions. So it is in your own interest, and I think it's really cool the way you articulated that.
I definitely think one thing like to that is that I've learned also myself is if something feels very difficult to do, then there's something wrong in my daily schedule. That's something I've changed also a lot throughout the years. The third session used to always be like the most mental thing, and it used to be so difficult to get myself to do it, and plenty of motivational videos in the background, and like really have to remember my why, and it was just exhausting me so much. But it's also because it was done too late. It was done at 7 p.m. Like, then I'm done at 8. Then I shower, eat. Then at 10 p.m., like all of a sudden it's 10 and I have to go to bed, and I don't feel I've had any downtime. And then it's just the next day starts, and it's like I get punched in the head every day. And changing the rhythm and changing things around. It's the same with, I used to, like with overnight oats, every night I have to make it, and I just dread it. But it's also because I do it as the last thing. When you're super tired, like you've been sitting in front of the television, and like now it's 10, you need to go to bed, and oh damn, I haven't made that yet. So like that's just a small thing, but for me it made a world difference to like just do it in the afternoon, and then I do 3 days ahead. Then I only need to do it every third day. So I definitely think if something feels like really bad in your day-to-day schedule, then take a step back and see what you can do to like maybe ease it off. Don't not train 3 times or 2 times or 1 time. Just like, okay, maybe if you woke up a bit earlier, or what if you prepared your back the night before, then it'll be easier in the morning to get it done, or whatever it might be.
Making that lower barrier of entry, basically, and making sure you actually get things done. And as you said, is I think the really important bit there that I loved is you still had to train 3 times, and there was no way about that. So you had to, as you say, you had to step back and reflect. And that's what I think that is also a big differentiator between someone that is aspiring to be, say, elite compared to, say, the everyday, because most of the everyday people are like, even if it was like doing the 3 sessions as an example, they just keep going at it until essentially they burn out, and they're like, oh, you're not supposed to do 3 sessions, and blame it on the 3 sessions. Whereas then the elite person or the aspiring elite will be like, okay, cool, I know I need to do this, so how can I manage this in my day, and then how can I optimize it? And I think you pulled out that really good example there of just saying, like, I just had to move it a bit. And then, and with the overnight oats, batching, or also then doing it earlier in the day. And it's like, you're sorted. I always love it when I prep my overnight oats, not at the last thing of the day. I'm exactly, as you said it just made me smile, because I was thinking, even though it's such an easy thing to do and it really doesn't take long, you're just like, oh, fuck, it's just such an ag. And you're like, but yeah, it's funny. It's great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Andre, we've got a few quick fire questions just to finish up. One, maybe not a short answer, but what's your proudest achievement so far to date?
I think it's difficult to put it on one thing. I think it's an accumulation of showing up every day. I think that's perhaps like since 2014, I went all in, like, and I haven't let go since that day. And I think that's what I'm proudest of. There's been small like things along the way that I've done that I'm proud of, like done it well at an event, or I mean the most recent is probably at Strength and Depth, where I was there with Red Pill and Mansfeld, and the first like event in the arena was the standard event, which is 30 clean and jerks, 30 muscle ups, and then 30 snatches. And he has said to me that I need to promise him to absolutely end myself and go harder than I think I can. And no matter who's next to me on the last 15 reps, just remember that there's 4 more heats, and those last 15 reps will determine how I will do this weekend. And he said, if I need to come carry you off, I will. And I absolutely ended myself in that event. I failed the last lift 3 times. I couldn't even power snatch 61 kilos. Like but I was still like, I was so happy. I mean, like that
You did your
that I
job.
really did that. And even though, yeah, if I had lifted that last bar a little bit faster, then I would have had a better score. But just, I think I was kind of so proud that I failed, because that meant that I have gone to the limit. And they wanted to interview me after, and I puked in my mouth 3 times before that interview. and yeah, that was just, I think that was one of the best moments.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's really cool. We had one earlier, but I'm going to ask you for one more example of something that you've changed your mind about. It could be in training, like the strength approach, or otherwise.
Yeah, I think again, just like the thing with the specifics of training, like like take a step back. Like I didn't do very well in the quarterfinals event too. I haven't done a lot of pistols due to like a shin issue, but it also just came down to like I could have done more air squats. I could have done lots more leg volume, and for me, I definitely think that, for example, now that in 7 weeks from now, or I mean, when this comes out, I don't know how long it will be, but when the semifinals comes around, like my first phase of training leading up to that is not doing lots of sport specific events. It's just dialing it back and look at, like, like a classic from Red Pill is like legs for days. I'll do different variations of that. I'll do the same for my upper body. I've made different variations of like upper body for days, and just building like endurance and stamina in my upper and lower body. And then in the next phase, then I'll put it together. And I think that's just one thing I've changed my mind on, is that, again, like take it back one step. You can't do like 400 chest bars a week, every week. So maybe you need to just look at, why is chest bars an issue? Like pulling endurance, and you'll do, different ways of pulling for 40 to 50 minutes. And that'll just build that stamina, just the same way you try to build your aerobic capacity. It's the same way you can approach trying to build other aspects of your training. So I think that's maybe something I've changed my mind on over the past couple of years.
That's great. And I think you might have answered this one as well. But if you don't win the games, who would you like to see win the games this year, now that Matt's out?
I would like to see BKG win the CrossFit Games. I said, like, he's probably the one that comes closest being a role model for me, and he's been super consistent, and he keeps showing up, and he's good around most skills, and you can be sure that if there's something he's not good at, he'll be working on it. And yeah, and I think he has all the right attributes, and I know him a bit personally, and I definitely hope to see him like achieve that.
Very cool. And final one, what do you think the biggest mistake is that most people are making in their training?
They don't have the patience to master skills, and they perhaps, okay, not work ethic, but also maybe not patience enough to build a proper base. Like to wanting things too quick is I think is the biggest mistake amongst coaches and clients. To sell an easy bar muscle up to a client, and that's just not the right way for me to go about it. Like I definitely recommend, for anyone new, or skill mastery has to be the main passion to start with, and then once you have mastered to a certain level, you don't need to be the world's best at ring muscle ups, but you know, master the things that require to nail that down that skill before having to do, you know, a cool CrossFit.com workout with loads of ring muscle ups. And yeah, it's just being more patient and more journey focused, and yeah, just taking your time.
I love that. That reminds me of just like when it comes to, for instance, using the open. We've mentioned this before. When someone gets their first ring muscle up and they say, "Oh, I can do muscle ups now," it's like, no, you managed to get yourself on top of the rings once. So, as you say, that skill acquisition of learning and owning that skill, whether it's strength of like back squatting a certain way, and you know every time you go into the gym, you can back squat say 100 kilos or whatever it is, and yeah, I think that's that thing of just honing that skill and building your foundational strength. I think it's like, I know me and Ash preach all the time, and it's so good to hear it coming from someone like yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Andre. That's been a really interesting and fun chat. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Good luck in the games.
Thank you so much. I hope I make it first.
Yeah, I know, but obviously the semis is obviously the first step, but getting close enough. I'm backing you to get there.
Thank you. Appreciate that a lot.
Cheers, Andre.
Cheers. So thanks a lot for listening, guys. As always, please, if you did like this episode, please share it with your friends, share it with anyone that is interested in CrossFit, and or anyone that just wants to know a little bit more about what it takes to become an elite athlete. So thanks a lot for taking the time, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Cheers, guys.